Hi, everybody. It's great to be here and to be a part of this. And I have a question for you all. For the women in the room, have you ever thought about who you would become if you'd been born male? Has that ever been a consideration? Yeah? And men in the room, have you ever thought who you might be if you'd been born female? Has any of the men ever thought about that? Okay, my idea is to turn all the women into men and all the men into women. Not forever, of course, but just so you could have the experience of somebody else, somebody of another gender, if you like. I'm not talking about drag or cross-dressing. What I'm doing is really confronting the gender binary. And I've thought a lot about gender. I'm a person who happens to be a woman. And I'm also a performance artist who, since the early 80s, I've specialized in male impersonation, that is, performing as a man. And in those early years, performing in theaters and galleries in New York, I was not aware of the possibilities, of the revolutionary possibilities of this work, of its possibility to create something new. And it really wasn't until I went out publicly into the world as a man that I had a realization that it could be quite useful. And that was in April 1989, and I went to an opening at the Whitney Museum, and I went as this character. And I thought, all my friends, they would just think it was a laugh. But actually, I waved to some friends across the room. It was very, very crowded, and they just gave me blank stares and ignored me. And then I saw some other friends of mine, so I came up to them and started talking to them, and they just looked at me like, who are you? And acted as if I was intruding on their conversation. So then I thought, I felt very alone because nobody recognized me, and I was incognito. So I thought I'd get myself a beer and a wall to lean against, just like men do, right? And so I would just stand there for a while and observe the crowd. Well, I hadn't been there very long. I'd just been looking at everybody. And I noticed a woman who was looking at me, so I looked right back at her, and she kept staring at me. And I thought, this woman is sort of interested in me. And I didn't really know what to do, because I had expected her to drop her gaze and to look elsewhere, which is what women generally do. Whereas I was just trying on this male role. I was just trying on this behavior as interested observer. And so she was very determined to engage with me, and she walked towards me, and I thought, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? And there was no escape, really. So she walked up to me, and she had this big smile, very open face. She said, "Hi, how are you doing? Do you know any of the artists?" And I sort of smiled very weakly, weak grin, like, and then grunted, because I was terrified that she would hear my female voice and just go nuts. So I thought, okay, maybe she's going to go away if I just show disinterest. But no, she carried on talking. And I thought, well, she must know I'm a woman. But she didn't. She was talking away and seemed very determined to impress me with her knowledge of the contemporary art scene in New York. And she said, well, the Whitney Museum has never had a biennial with so many artists of color and gay artists, and this is the first biennial of this time, and so on and so on. Meanwhile, I was sweating under my jacket, And my heart was beating really fast, and I thought, well, how am I going to deal with this? So I gulped down my beer, and I thought, oh, geez, can't she see that I'm not really interested in her? So I tried grunting again, and then, sort of turned around, and then she followed me, and then she was in my face and talking to me as if, we were together or something. And I thought, oh, how am I going to escape? So much against what I would have done as a woman, which this would have seemed extremely rude, I just walked away from the situation. And I went to the second floor of the Whitney Museum, and I was looking at a painting, and I'd been there for a couple of minutes, and I felt this tap on my shoulder, and it was this woman. And there she was, acting like we were a couple. And I just kept looking at her with disbelief. And by this time, my shirt was soaking with perspiration. My face was flushed red, and I was sure that half of my moustache had fallen off. But she didn't seem to notice at all. She seemed completely nonplussed and just delighted that we were together. And I thought, wow, this is so interesting. Without really knowing me, hearing me talk, or anything, this woman has just made herself available. She's decided I'm the one for her. And I thought, well, this is really interesting if she could see herself. So I beat a retreat to the men's toilet, and I hung out there until enough time had passed, and I felt it was safe to leave. So I never saw this woman again, but in the days that followed this experience, I really thought about the implications of this encounter. And I thought, if women had this possibility to go out as men and publicly interact as men, they would find out a lot about themselves as women in the process of being perceived as male. And they might learn new behaviours and other responses than constantly smiling all the time and apologizing, which is what a lot of women do. And so, for the past more than 25 years, I have been teaching workshops where women become men for a weekend. These are workshops where women take on the persona of men, and they create them, they research them themselves. The process, the technique, if you like, is similar to what an actor would do. You develop a persona, and then they become these characters. And then they go out publicly as these men and interact in the world as men. And they find out a lot of things about themselves in the process. Probably you're wondering who these women are. Who are they? Who's signing up for this, and what are they looking for? Well, I can tell you that the women are of all ages, all sizes, all ethnicities, sexualities, classes, and all their reasons are equally varied. So this is one woman who participated in the workshop in New Delhi, and her desire was to go to rock concerts, to watch bands. And she developed a male character so she could do this without getting hit on. Because as a woman doing this in New Delhi, it might have been pretty difficult. It would have been difficult. So the male persona allowed her passage. There was another woman, a single mother from Leipzig, who had this desire, or she thought she had a desire to become a man permanently. And the workshop was a way for her to, it was a catalyst, if you like, for her to work through this idea, this feeling that she had. And she also developed the confidence then to leave the workshop and meet her 16-year-old daughter and tell her, come out to her daughter as the man that she had become. There was a woman in Boston who did the workshop who wanted to buy a car, and having had the experience that car dealers are under the mistaken assumption that women know nothing about cars, she went in her male persona she told me later that she cut a deal that she felt she could never have done as a woman. There are businesswomen that have done this workshop, so they want to learn new behaviours in order to learn how to stand their ground when they're in a workplace with very dominant men. There are many, many reasons that women have done this. And the behaviours they learn are what you might imagine, very different behaviours from what women have. One woman said that she was given so much more space in the world. Women always got out of her way. And standing in line was faster, getting her ticket was faster, she got a beer easier as a man. Another woman was saying that she felt that she was really too nice, too kind, too polite sometimes. And she said she had to ask herself, how would you do that as a man? And then she said that gave her more confidence to think like that. It freed her from the limited behavior that's expected of her as a woman. And in the process, she learned a lot about feminine behavior, what it is, and responses to it. So before you men in the room begin to get too comfortable, I have a question for you, which is, what do you think you might gain by becoming a woman? Do you think that there's anything you might gain from that? Because I also teach Woman for a Day workshops. And in this particular workshop, the men had a lot of hesitation, I should let you know. And normally, the Woman for a Day workshop takes longer because men need more time to choose their clothes. And in this particular workshop, there was a lot of discussion, anxiety, uncertainty beforehand. These men were wondering why they had decided to do it, you know, what was going to happen, what kind of person were they going to become. And they had a sense they assumed that they were going to lose power, but they didn't really know what they would gain. One of the men was a 55-year-old technician working in a macho environment with other guys, and he was married, and he had been a gay magnet his whole life, and he wanted to discover some female aspect of himself. So another person was a mime student. He wanted to learn new behaviors and new performance skills. And another participant was an academic who felt very unprepared. He said he was doing this for himself, and it was also a chance for him to be outside of his normal routine. He was very excited to have this opportunity. But at the same time, he had no idea who he would become. And it was a surprise to him, but he became a very attractive woman. And then later, he and another member of the workshop enjoyed the opportunity to go to a local bar and then be admired and given attention by the men in the bar. Now, okay, this is like very basic, and I think this is what most men imagine what it's like to be women. It's not actually like that. But for a lot of men who go into this area of cross-dressing, or they get dressed up as women, they think that everybody's going to join their fan club, you know. But that's not really what it's like to be a woman. But that's the assumption. And in fact, what these men did discover was a new experience of their bodies altogether. They felt that they weren't so armored. They could have more freedom in the way they used their bodies. They also had this experience of a variety of emotions that they had never expressed before, including the ability to giggle with pleasure, which is something that they as men had never done before. As Irving Goffman said in 1959, gender, not religion, is the opiate of the masses. And yet, in 2016, we are still policing our gender behavior of each other. And as the contemporary feminist philosopher Judith Butler said, masculine and feminine roles are not biologically fixed, but socially constructed. So this being the case, I would suggest that we have a lot to learn from our members of our society who are gender different or who are nonconformist in their gender representation. I actually have no idea how it feels to be a man. I have no idea how it feels to be a woman. All I know is how it feels to be me and what it means to be me. However, I have explored male behavior. I've studied male behavior, I've studied female behavior. I know how to perform those things. And what I would suggest and what I offer is the possibility to be more. Thank you.